Hi you guys, so today we are moving on with our quadratic solutions and we're solving by completing the square. So if you remember from last class, we talked about being able to square root our answers. Well, now we're just taking it to one more step. So we first need to talk about what it means to have a square and how we can complete it. So we're talking about these perfect square trinomials, which we've done before. So if we look here at our first example, we've got x plus 1 squared. So if something's a perfect square, it means I'm taking the same binomial, so those same two terms, like shown here, and I'm squaring them. Okay, so then it looks like my x plus 1 times my x plus 1. So it's the same thing times itself. So that gets me x squared. If I was to FOIL it, I would have x squared plus 1x plus 1x plus 1. So then I can go ahead and combine those like terms in the middle, and I've got x squared plus 2x plus 1. Okay, we're going to keep doing this, and we're going to notice a pattern as we keep going. So if I move my screen over and we work on this next problem, we've got the same thing times itself. This time it's x minus 5 squared. So we'll have x squared minus 5x minus 5x. And then negative 5 times negative 5 gets me that positive 25. Okay, if we combined those like terms again, we'll have x squared minus 10x plus 25. Some of you may be noticing a pattern. We're going to keep going. Let's move on to this x minus 2 squared. So x minus 2 times x minus 2, that means we've got x times x, that's our x squared. X times negative 2, negative 2x, negative 2 times x, negative 2x, negative 2 times negative 2, that becomes a positive 4. Again, combine those like terms, so we've got x squared minus 4x plus 4. One more example here so that we can kind of figure out what this pattern is. Got x plus 7 times x plus 7. That makes it an x squared plus 7x plus 7x plus 49. So x squared plus 14x when we combine those terms plus 49. I'm going to give you a second to kind of start looking at that pattern. So what is the pattern that we're noticing from those perfect square trinomials? Okay, so when we multiply our x times our x, that's always going to give us that x squared. Then our middle piece, if we look at our 14x, our negative 10x, our negative 4x, what happened there? Well, that was me taking what I had, so my a term, which was negative 2, and I can multiply it by 2 to get negative 4, or my negative 5, multiply it by 2, get negative 10, or my positive 7, multiply it by 2, and get 14. So that's like saying plus 2 times whatever our a is, and then we have an x next to it. And then last, we have our a times our a, which just means it's a squared. So this piece right here would be like saying a number doubled. So whatever that number is, whatever our a value is, and then this is our number squared. All right. So let's talk about what it means to complete the perfect squares. So we know that our middle component, my middle piece, so my 18x, that's multiplying my a term times 2. So if I divide it by 2, I can kind of start working backwards. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. So in my perfect square, I would have x plus 9 times x plus 9. Okay, well, I'm looking for that last component. I'm looking for what my a squared is. So all I need to do is take 9 and square it. Well, 9 squared is 81. So this just means 81. Okay, let's do it again for the next one. I've got negative 16 divided by 2, which is negative 8. And then we're going to take that and we're going to square it. and that gives me negative 8 times negative 8, which is positive 64. So that's for my second term. And then my last one, I've got x squared minus 24x plus something. Well, we're figuring out what that something is. So negative 24 divided by 2, that's negative 12. Go ahead and square negative 12. Well, that's positive 144. So that's me completing my square there. It is really important that you can do this quickly because that is not the main focus of this question. Being able to solve for x afterwards is. All right, let's look at example number 1. So we're solving the equation, and we're going to use our completing the square method. So I've got x squared plus 18x, and if I'm completing the square, I'm going to need to add something. I don't know what that something is yet. We're going to figure that out. Well, if I add something to one side, I have to do it to the other side. We can't change the value of this equation. Okay, so I'm going to complete my square. I'm going to divide 18 by 2. That gets me that 9, and then I'm going to square 9, and that gives me 81. So to complete this square, I'm going to add 81. Well, again, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I've got my 81 there. And now I just continue down with my steps. So my second step, if we look over here to the side, my first step was to complete the square. Well, I just did that. My next step is to factor. So I'm going to factor my trinomial that's on the left. Let me go ahead and move this out of my way. All right. Factor, I know it's going to be the same thing, and it's going to be squared. I'm going to go ahead and simplify this other side. So 40 plus 81 is 121. So my goal was to get that perfect square. So we know it's going to be x plus something since this sign is a positive. Well, what's the square root of 81? It's 9. That's it. Now, when we completed our, when we did square root problems before, once we have something squared, we can square root both sides. So I have something squared. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to square root my left side, which means I have to square root my right side. Well, anything squared, square rooted, is just whatever that number is on the inside. So I now have x plus 9 equals positive or negative 11. If I take the square of positive 11, I get 121. If I take the square of negative 11, I get 121. So there's two different solutions that I could get from square rooting 121. Okay, technically I don't need these parentheses anymore. I already got rid of my square on the outside, so there's nothing happening outside of those parentheses. So now all I need to do is subtract 9 from both sides. So those will cancel out, so I've got x equals negative 9 plus or minus 11. Well, that plus or minus means I'm going to have two solutions, and I can go ahead and separate my problem into those two solutions. So I'm going to split it up. I know I've got negative 9 plus 11, or I could have that negative 9 minus 11. So then we just keep simplifying so I can get those two solutions. All right, so negative 9 minus or plus 11 is going to be positive 2. Negative 9 minus 11 is negative 20. So my two solutions for this, when all is said and done, I don't know why that keeps just staying there, would be x equals 2 or negative 20. Sorry, 2 and negative 20. They're both solutions for this. All right, you guys, we're moving on to number 2. So we're going to follow the same steps. We're first going to complete that square, which means I'm going to add something to both sides. Then we're going to factor. So I have the something squared equals a number. Then we'll square root both sides and find our solutions. So here we go for number 2. X squared minus 12x equals negative 35. Got to complete that square first, so I'm going to have x squared minus 12x plus something. We're going to figure out what that something is in a second. Minus 35 plus something. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So now let's figure out that something. Well, it's going to be negative 12 divided by 2. That's our negative 6, and then we're going to square that to get whatever our c would be. So negative 6 squared, that is 36. So 36 needs to be added to both sides. Well, now we can go ahead and factor our left side and simplify our right side. So this will be x something squared equals negative 35 plus 36 would be just plain 1. All right. Now our sign always comes from whatever our sign is of our b, so that's going to be minus. And then we take the square root of whatever our c is. Well, our c right now is 36, so square root that, that's 6. All right. Now we have something squared equals a number, so we square root both sides. Well, we know that the square root of anything that's being squared is just that anything, so I've got x minus 6 equals, and then the square root of 1 is plus or minus 1. Okay, we still don't have x by itself yet, so we need to add 6 to both sides. Those cancel, so now we've got x equals 6 plus or minus 1. Again, we can break that into those two solutions, so we've got x equals 6 plus 1, x equals 6 minus 1. That would give me x equals 7 or 5. And again, it's and 5. Either one of those would be solutions for this problem. Let's move on to number 3. Now, number 3 is a little bit different. I have a coefficient in front of that x squared, so I have to get rid of that coefficient first. So I'm going to go ahead and just zoom into this problem. All right. Got to get rid of that coefficient, so we're going to factor it out. So we're going to have 3 on the outside, and we're going to have x squared. Remember, you have to divide both things by 3. So minus 4x equals 180. We don't have to factor the other side. We're not factoring anything else out. Notice I left a blank. Well, that's because we're still going to complete that square. We're still going to add something to both sides. It's just going to be different what we're adding to both sides this time, but it'll mathematically be the same number. Okay, so again, we're going to have to divide negative 4 by 2. That would be negative 2, and then we're going to square that. Well, negative 2 squared is positive 4. Okay, remember we factored out a 3 here. So I added 4 to this side, but technically because this 3 is in front, I added 12 to this side. So because of that, I have to add 12 to the other side. All right, now we're just going to keep going. We're going to factor our parentheses, so we still have the 3 on the outside. We're going to have x. This sign comes from here, so minus, and then 4 square root of 4 is 2. And that's going to equal 192. Okay, we keep on going, so we're going to have to simplify. I'm sorry, I forgot my square. We need to simplify whatever that squared term is. We have to get by itself. So we're going to divide by 3 on both sides. That's x minus 2 squared, and that equals 64. Okay, so now we can square root both sides, our squared terms by itself. So you've got x minus 2 equals plus or minus 8. And this is the easy part, add 2 to both sides. So x equals 2 plus or minus 8. You can split that up, and your solution would be x equals 10 and negative 6. Last problem, I'm going to go pretty fast this time. Again, this has a leading coefficient, so we need to factor that coefficient out first. So we're going to factor 4 out twice. So we're going to have x squared plus 2x plus something. Remember, we're completing that square. Equals 140 plus something. Okay, divide 2 by 2. That's 1. Square 1 is 1. Now I added 1 here, but it's like adding 4 because I'm multiplying on the outside, so I need to add 4 to the other side. Go ahead and factor, so that's x plus 1 squared equals 144. Divide both sides by 4 to get your term that is being squared by itself. So I've got x plus 1 squared equals 36. Looks pretty so far. Square root both sides. X plus 1 equals plus or minus 6. Then we're subtracting 1 on both sides, so x minus 1 plus or minus 6 would be our two solutions, and we need to simplify that. So x would equal negative 7 and positive 5. There we go. Go ahead and complete your 10 10 F notes as well, and then check your notes with the sub to get your assignment for today.